Hi, students. Welcome to video 4. It is on terrestrial biomes. So from now on, I'm going to give you the objectives that College Board says that you need to know. So for this video, you need to describe the global distribution and principal environmental aspects of terrestrial biomes, and you need to be able to discuss human impacts on terrestrial biomes. So when you look at this map, this shows you the temperature and precipitation of different biomes and kind of shows it all in one graph. So I would not draw this graph, but I would make sure that I know that temperature and precipitation are the two most important factors in determining a biome. So you probably are aware the tropical rainforest has the most rain, the desert has the least. Desert also has the highest temperatures. Tundra is going to have the lowest temperatures. Okay, so just again, general information looking at thinking about temperature and precipitation of these things. So when we look at the biomes of the world, they are not scattered randomly throughout the globe. They actually are based on latitude patterns. So remember, latitude are the flat lines running like the equator, north and south of the equator. So you'll notice that tropical rainforests are along the equator. Then as we go further north, you have deserts at about 30 degrees, and then you have colder biomes like the boreal forest and the tundra towards the top. So again, they're not random, they actually have a pattern. And we look at the sensitivity, the ones that are the most sensitive to things like changes in temperature and rainfall are going to be the ones that are typically colder. So up here in Russia and Canada, we have a lot of the boreal forests, we said, and those are going to be the places that are most sensitive. So again, we're looking at the north areas that are going to be the most sensitive. And basically, this is showing the same thing. These are the modern day biomes. And they're not going to be the same. They haven't been the same all throughout history either. So in the future, they're going to be changing. So that boreal forest, which is colder, you're going to notice that that blue is kind of gone in a lot of these in the future maps. And it's going to change mostly into dry grasslands. So it's going to become more desert-like and less forest-like. So the thing I want you to know about this graph is that we are a temperate deciduous forest. Please make sure you know that. Basically, that means we have 4 seasons. The other parts of the United States are mainly temperate grassland. So those are the 2 predominant ones in the U.S., and this is where we grow a lot of our food. So again, we are mainly temperate deciduous forest. That's mainly the thing I want you to know from here. So when we look at factors that impact biomes, we already kind of talked about latitude. So latitude is, remember, the going north or south of the equator. Excuse me. So we already said that when we farther go north, the colder we get. But the same thing happens with altitude. So imagine climbing up a mountain. It gets colder and colder. A lot of times there's snow on the top of the mountain. This is why you might have snow and ice towards the equator, even though it's really hot around the equator. So again, just make sure you understand the higher up the mountain you go, the colder it's going to be. So this is an effect called the rain shadow effect. This is again dealing with mountains. So we have a windward side and we have a leeward side. The windward side is the side where the wind is first blowing to. And most of the time it's around an ocean or lake or something like that. And so there's a lot of moisture right here in the air from the ocean or the lake. And what's happening is that air mass is blowing towards the mountain. And it is on the windward side of the mountain, there's a lot of rain, there's a lot of moisture. So that air is going to rain a lot. But then once it goes up the mountain, it's lost all its moisture. So on the other side, the leeward side, it's not going to have a lot of moisture. So you may have a desert on the leeward side, and you might have a forest on the windward side. So when you think about oceans and lakes, the biggest impact that oceans and lakes have on climates of biomes is it just makes them more stable throughout the whole year. So you're going to probably have more stable temperatures. You're not going to have like crazy nights and crazy days. You're not going to vary by 50 degrees in one day. You're also going to have a lot more rain if you are closer to an ocean, which probably makes a little bit more sense. So the way that we can represent a biome is with something called a climatograph. So a climatograph again shows those two important things, precipitation and temperature, and it shows it on the same exact graph. And you can look out throughout, or you can look in the entire year. In this situation, the green is showing the temperature, and then the red is highs, the blue is lows. So this is for Raleigh-Durham area. We're going to look at some of these, and you'll be more familiar with looking at the different climatographs. So there are three types of deserts that you should know, and I would maybe jot down an example of each type. So a tropical desert is probably the one that you think of when you think of a desert. It's like the Sahara Desert. It's very, very dry, very hot. It's going to be around 30 degrees, and we'll talk about why that is in a little while. The temperate deserts are going to be a little bit less hot, so they'll have temperature changes seasonally and they'll have more rain, and that's like the Atacama Desert. And then the polar deserts are going to be very hot in the summer and then really, really freezing in the winter, and they're going to have lots of snow and ice, and that will be like Antarctica. So what are we doing to deserts? Remember, you need to know human impacts on the biomes. Basically, we're building cities in deserts, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense sometimes. For example, Las Vegas is in the desert, so we have to get water to Las Vegas because they don't have their own. So that causes depletion of groundwater. We're also storing our waste there because we're like, oh, well, nobody wants to really live in the desert, so let's just put all our junk there. We're also riding vehicles, ATVs, things like that, causing soil erosion. So grasslands also have tropical, temperate, and polar. Tropical is usually between deserts and rainforests. This is kind of the transition zone from a desert to a rainforest. And they have wet and dry seasons, so they don't have 4 seasons. Temperate deserts tend to be on the inside of continents. They're a little bit more consistent with their rainfall. And then polar deserts have what we call permafrost. And if you're not sure what permafrost is, you do want to write down permafrost is permanently frozen soil, and it contains a lot of really important greenhouse gases. And so if we actually warm the temperature of the planet, that permafrost starts to melt and those greenhouse gases can be emitted. And that is going to be a problem because it actually has methane, which is a more prominent greenhouse gas even than carbon dioxide is. So some human impacts on grasslands. Mainly we're using them for livestock and grazing and trying to grow crops. So that's causing the release of CO2 because we're burning the area to kind of get rid of all the shrubs and stuff. We're also kind of a tragedy of the commons situation with overgrazing, and we're causing damage to places like the tundra because we're doing oil exploration to different places. So the chaparral is, I like to put this Hollywood sign out because most people are familiar with this. When you see the Hollywood sign, that is the chaparral. This is one of the reasons why we've had so many bad fires in California because it is supposed to burn. If you live in the chaparral, you can just expect that your house is probably going to catch fire at some point. So this is, again, one of those transition zones. Now we're transitioning from grasslands to forests. It's hot, dry summers and cool, moist winters, and it has lots of little shrubs, but not a whole lot of trees. Excuse me. So looking at tropical rainforests, most people are really familiar with lots of plants and lots of animals. They typically know that they're on the equator, and it has very nutrient poor soil actually because of how much biodiversity it has. There's so many plants there that they basically take up all of the nutrients out of the soil. Hey, Bella, come here. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy. So they basically take up all the nutrients in the soil and there's nothing left in the soil. So it's going to be pretty nutrient poor soil. So again, temperate deciduous forest, that's what we are. Plenty of rain, we have 4 seasons, we have these nice, beautiful tree colors throughout the year. The trees lose their leaves throughout the year, but we do have a lot of biodiversity. And then this map up here, you can see kind of where the temperate deciduous forest is located. Again, notice it is not just random. The taiga, which we also call the boreal forest, most of this is in Canada and Russia, you'll see down here. And they have long, really harsh winters and very short growing seasons. But they have lots of trees that are coniferous. They're culm-bearing, needle-like, and they basically stay green at all times. So they're not going to be losing their leaves throughout the year. So human impacts on forests, basically deforestation. So we're clearing land for agriculture, for grazing, for logging. We're converting to tree plantations, like for Christmas trees, things where, we're basically having to destroy the forest area. So deforestation would basically be a summary of all these things. All right, that's it. Let me know if you have any questions, and make sure you do your Ed puzzle.